Hello, my name is Wendy. My student number is S04411057. The speech title is How to Stop Torture. The speaker is Karen Tsai. I'm a freshman in NCUE. In 1994, I walked into the prison in Cambodia and I met a 12-year-old boy who had been tortured and was denied access to consult. And as I looked into his eyes, I realized that for the hundreds of letters I had written for political prisoners, that I would never have written a letter for him, because he was not a 12-year-old boy who had done something important for anybody. He was not a political prisoner. He was a 12-year-old boy who had stolen a bicycle. What I also realized at that point was that it was not only Cambodia, but of the 113 developing countries that tortured 93 of these countries have all passed laws that say you have a right to a lawyer and you have a right not to be tortured. And what I recognized was that there was an incredible window of opportunity for us as a world community to come together and end torture as an investigative tool. We often think of torture as being political torture or reserved for just the worst, but in fact, 95% of torture today is not for political prisoners. It is for people who are in broken down legal systems, and unfortunately, because torture is the cheapest form of investigation, it's cheaper than having a legal system, cheaper than having a lawyer and clear access to consult. It is what happens most of the time. I believe today that it is possible for us as a world community, if we make a decision to come together and end torture as an investigative tool in our lifetime. But it will require three things. First is the training, empowerment, and the connection of defenders worldwide. The second is ensuring that there is systematic early access to consult, and the third is commitment. So in the year 2000, I began to wonder, what if we came together? Could we do something for these 93 countries? And I founded International Bridges to Justice, which has a specific mission of ending torture as an investigative tool and implementing due process rights in the 93 countries by placing trained lawyers at an early stage in police stations and in courtrooms. My first experiences though did come from Cambodia, and at the time I remember first coming to Cambodia. There were in 1994. In 1994, still less than 10 attorneys in the country, because the Khmer Rouge had killed them all. And even 20 years later, there was only 10 lawyers in the country. So consequently, you'd work into the prison, and not only would you meet 12-year-old boys, you'd meet women, and you'd say, "What are you here?" Women would say, "Well, I've been here for 10 years because my husband committed a crime, but I can't find him. So it's just a place where there was no rule of law." The first group of defenders came together, and I still remember. As I'm training, I said, "Okay, what do you do for an investigation?" And there was silence in the class, and finally, one woman stood up in audible name, and she said, "Which means teacher," she said. "I have defended more than a hundred people, and I've never had to do any investigation, because they don't come with confessions. And we talked about as a class the fact that number one, the confessions might not be reliable, but number two, we did not want to encourage the police to keep doing this, especially as it was not against the law, and it took a lot of courage for these defenders to decide that they would begin to stand up and support each other in implementing these laws. And I still remember the first cases where they came, all 25 together. She would stand up, and they were in the back, and they would support her. And the judges kept saying, "No, no, no, no. We're going to do things the exact same way we've been doing them." But one day, the perfect case came, and it was a woman. There was a woman who was a vegetable seller. She was sitting outside of a house. She said she actually saw the person run out who she thinks stole whatever the jewelry was. But the police came. They got her. There was nothing on her. She was pregnant at the time. She had a cigarette burns on her. She'd miscarried. And when they brought her case to the judge, for the first time he stood up and he said, "Yes, there's no evidence except for your torture confessions, and you will be released." And the defenders began to take cases over and over again, and you'll see, they have step by step began to change the course of history in Cambodia. But Cambodia is not alone. I used to think, well, is it Cambodia, or is it other countries? But it is in so many countries. In Burundi, I walked into the prison, and it wasn't a 12-year-old boy. It was an 8-year-old boy for stealing a mobile phone. Or a woman. I picked up her baby, really cute baby. I said, "Your baby is so cute." It wasn't a baby. She was 3. And she said, "Yeah, but she's why I'm here." Because she was accused for stealing 2 diapers and an iron for her baby, and still had been in prison. And when I walked up to the prison director, I said, "You've got to lay her out. A judge would lay her out." And he said, "Okay, we can talk about it. But look at my prison. 80% of the 2,000 people here are without a lawyer. What can we do?" So lawyers began to courageously stand up together to organize a system where they can take cases. But we realized that it is not only the training for the lawyers, but the connection of the lawyers that makes a difference. For example, in Cambodia, it was that inaudible name did not go along, but she had 24 lawyers with her who stood up together. And in the same way, in China, they always tell me it's like a fresh wind in the desert when we can come together. Or in Zimbabwe, where I remember innocent after coming out of the prison, where everybody stood up and said, "I've been here for 1 year, 8 years, 12 years without a lawyer." He came and we had a training together, and he said, "I have heard it said," because he had heard people mumbling and grumbling. "I have heard it said that we cannot help to create justice because we do not have the resources." And then he said, "But I want you to know that the lack of resources is never an excuse for injustice." And with that, he successfully organized the 68 lawyers who have been systematically taking the cases. The key that we see though is training and then early access. I was recently in Egypt and was inspired to meet with another group of lawyers, and what they told me is that they said, Hey, look, we don't have a police on the streets now. The police are one of the main reasons why we had the revolution. They were retorting everybody all the time. And I said, but there's been tens of millions of dollars that have recently gone into the development of the legal system here. What's going on? I met with one of the development agencies and they were training prosecutors and judges, which is the normal bias as opposed to defenders. And they showed me a manual which actually was an excellent manual. I said I was gonna copy this. It had everything in it. Lawyers can come at a police station. It was perfect. Prosecutors were perfectly trained. But I said to them, I just have one question, which is, by the time that everybody got to the prosecutor's office, what had happened to them? And after a pause, they said they had been tortured. So the pieces are not only the training of the lawyers, but as finding a way to systematically implement early access to consult, because they are the safeguard in the system for people who are being tortured. And as I tell you this, I'm also aware of the fact that it sounds like, oh, okay, it sounds like we could do it, but can we really do it? Because it sounds big, and there are many reasons why I believe it's possible. The first reason is the people on the ground who found ways to creating miracles because of their commitment is not only innocent. Who I tell you about it? Zimbabwe, but defenders all over the world who are looking for these pieces. We have a program called Justice Makers, and we realize there are people they are courageous and want to do things. But how can we support them? So it's an online contest where it's only $5,000 if you come up with an innovative way of implementing justice. And there are 30 justice makers throughout the world, from Sri Lanka to Switzerland to the DRC, who is $5,000 to do amazing things through SMS programs, through paralegal programs, through whatever they can do. And it is not only these justice makers, but people we can courageously figure out who their networks are and how they can move it forward. So in China, for instance, great laws come out where it says police cannot torture people or they will be punished. And I was sitting side by side with one of our very courageous lawyers, and said, how can we get this out? How can we make sure that this is implemented? This is fantastic. And he said to me, well, do you have money? And I said, no. And he said, that's okay, we can figure it out. And on December 4th, he organized the 300 numbers of the Youth Communist League from 14 of the top law schools, who organized themselves, developed posters with the new laws, and went to the police station and began what they say is a non-violent legal revolution to protect citizens' rights. So I talked about the fact that we need to train and support defenders. We need to systematically implement early access to consult. But the third and most important thing is that we make a commitment to this. And the people often said to me, this is great, but it's widely idealistic, never going to happen. And the reason that I think that those words are interesting is because those were the same kinds of words they were used for people who decided they would end slavery and or end apartheid. It began with a small group of people who decided they would commit. Now there's one of our favorite points from the defenders, which they shared from each other, is take courage, friends. The road is often long, the path is ever clear, and the stakes are very high. But deep down, you are not alone. And I believe that if we can come together as a world community to support not only defenders but also everyone in the system who is looking towards it, we can end the torture as an investigative tool. I end always because I'm sure the questions are, and I'd be happy to talk to you at any point. But what can I really do? What I would say is, first of all, you know what you can do. But second of all, I would leave you with the story of Vishnu, who actually was my inspiration for starting International Bridges to Justice. Vishnu was a 4-year-old boy when I met him, who was born in a Cambodian prison in Kandal province. But because he was born in the prison, everybody loved him, including the guards. So he was the only one who was allowed to come in and out of the bars. So there's bars, and by the time that Vishnu was getting bigger, which means what gets bigger, your head gets bigger. So he would come to the first bar, the second bar, and then the third bar, and then slowly moving his head so he could be through and come back. Third, second, first, and he would grab my pinky, because what he wanted to do every day is he wanted to go visit. He never quite made it to. He never quite made it to all of them every day, but he wanted to visit all 156 prisoners, and I would lift him, and then he would put his fingers through, or if they were dark cells, it was like iron corrugated, and he would put his fingers through. And most of the prisoners said that he was their greatest joy and their sunshine, and they looked toward him, and I was like, here's Vishnu. He's a 4-year-old boy. He was born in a prison with almost nothing, no material goods, but he had a sense of his own heroic journey, which I believe we are all born into. He said, probably, I can't do everything, but I'm one. I can do something, and I will do the one thing that I can do. So I thank you for having the prophetic imagination to imagine the shaping of a new world with us together, and I invite you into this journey with us. Thank you. Applause. Thank you. Applause. Thank you. Applause.